I spend a lot of time lately thinking about health. And in particular, I believe that we incarnate into this physical existence preloaded with certain inclinations and gifts and abilities. And some people are very body centric and health oriented naturally. And they can grasp health issues and what's going on inside of them very, very, very well. Whereas other people, like myself, come preloaded with this ability to understand one's mind and to understand other people's minds and to deeply, deeply untangle patterns and understand things about people that they don't even necessarily understand about themselves. Other people come very emotionally in tuned, where they can read a room like the back of their hand in a blink of an eye, whereas the other two people, the subtypes that I mentioned, might struggle at first until they turn these abilities online. And there are other forms and character builds, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to keep it simple. And what I have found is that we start with one as like a predominant skill, and then we load another one. So as we awaken, we start to grow what I call our mosaic. If you think of like a kaleidoscope, we have little fractions of all of the possibilities of self mastery and skills and abilities on the table. We will preferentially not go in a linear fashion because we'll start at different orientations, and instead we'll light up suites of abilities like a character build in a video game, assigning skill points to a certain tree and not others. And we master those, and then we move on to another series of categories. And what I have found is that in my awakening journey, my relationship with my body has been the last to come online. And certainly when I was unconscious, I cared about health. I cared about fitness. I cared about not dying and things of that nature. But now, since my awakening, I really care about health in almost like, I don't want to say obsessive because that has a wrong connotation, but it is a focus. It takes up a lot of thought energy. In particular, most recently, I have just been really consumed by this idea that we, as conscious spiritual beings inhabiting these physical forms, we're driving cars effectively. And what's alarming about this analogy is how we pretty much don't know when we're going to die until we fall over or until we get some heavy diagnosis. And by the time we get that, it's often very advanced. So, for example, in my PhD, I used to study Parkinson's disease. And by the time that people would get a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, they had already lost a substantial part of very important motor neurons, dopaminergic neurons in the striatum, and they were pretty much already gone. And by the time that those advanced symptoms manifested, there was not much. When I was getting my PhD, things have changed now. It's been a long time since I got my PhD, and medicine has advanced, science has advanced quite a bit. But back then, it was like, well, sorry, we're going to make you comfortable for the rest of your life. We're going to do some experimental treatments, but there's no way we can regrow those neurons. And what was frustrating about this was realizing that there were signs and signals that would be decades before that diagnosis. And if we had the proper tools, AI integration, for example, or personalized medicine, then we would be able to forecast that well before and create interventions that would actually help people before it got to the red danger zone. By the time you get to the doctor, it's already too late. And this is the the whole issue with Western medicine is that it's not preventative focused. And there's some conspiracy theories about that that's not the focus of this episode. And I don't even know if I entirely agree with that. The system is the system, and it doesn't matter if it has malintent. It needs to be fixed. Either way, it's like that's just a side cherry, a black necrotic cherry, more than like icing and cherry on the top. Anyway, so as a result, if we understood what was happening to our vehicles more clearly and robustly, then we would be able to understand things like not just keeling over and dropping dead from a heart attack. I knew a person whose father died just randomly. He was like in his 60s, otherwise healthy, and it was over the holidays. Literally, he went to sleep and didn't wake up, and he died of a heart attack. And it was devastating for the family, and he had no idea, like, how is that possible? How do we just die? Like, how do we have these vehicles that don't have a check engine light? I mean, I guess they kind of do. If you go to your doctor and you get the lab test and you check certain things, but here is the catch, right? Your cholesterol levels and blood pressure could be perfect. In fact, many people's are, but you could have a particular type of genetic predisposition. I think it's like the APY gene or the APY something. Anyway, there is a malformation of your cholesterol where it changes the molecule. And, or I should have brushed myself up on this, sorry, is really interesting because it also increases inflammation. And I don't remember the specifics, and I'm not trying to teach you any science here. This is not my specialty. The heart is not my specialty. But what's fascinating is that there can be people who are perfectly healthy, following the best diets, exercising, marathon runners. Their labs look great, and they could die randomly from a heart attack. Boom. And they can get tested for this. There's actually a blood test for it. But the blood test doesn't tell you when you're going to die, if you're going to die. It just tells you that you have a strong predisposition for it. And this to me is really shocking because now these are obvious examples. But now let's take a look at the chemical nature of products. And educating myself on this has just been eye-opening because I used to be so naive to marketing. If something said it was good for me on the package, then I believed it. Especially if it was something like FDA approved. And I remember being blindsided time and time again. Like one of the most poignant memories for me was when I purchased diapers for my newborn. And I opened them and it was like a chemical bomb had gone off in my room. And the scent, or there was something wrong with them, gave me an instant headache. And within minutes to an hour, made her skin red. And I stopped using them, obviously, after like the first one, after I realized it, that it was irritating her skin and it was irritating my nose. And I put them in a drawer and I closed the drawer in my room. And my room, the smell actually pervaded into my room and was bothering me at night. So this was a main brand that I won't mention it because it's not super critical right now. But I went online and I started researching it, and it turns out there were class action lawsuits against this company for injuring little children, like the most sensitive areas. And these diapers were still being sold as if nothing was really being done about it because these lawsuits were like years old. And I thought, okay, it's just a freak accident. So I went with another major brand. And after 2 or 3 iterations of buying diapers, the same thing happened. Except this time I didn't put my child in them. I tried to return the diapers, but the store wouldn't take them. And I researched this brand. I should have done it before, but I just assumed, major brand, everybody likes it. It's, very robust, like everybody uses them. And so I'm thinking, well, obviously they're going to be safe. It's just a one off experience with this other brand, which was also a major brand, probably owned by the same parent company. I haven't looked into that. And the same thing happened with the second brand and then a third brand. And that's when I started getting really scared because these are little tiny babies. And thankfully, I'm more awake now than I was when I was unconscious. Because what I found is that there were a lot of parents that didn't know that they were chemical burns and they thought they were just diaper rashes. So they were on Reddit talking about these diaper rashes that ended up being chemical burns. And I don't know why we can't use things like our noses to smell and to trust that instinct. So when I started shopping for diapers, I would actually poke a hole. Sorry, I did. I would poke a hole in the bag and I would smell the diapers before I bought them. And if there were any noxious fumes, I would not purchase that bag. And I finally did find 2 brands that I didn't have a problem with and that I trusted. But that doesn't mean that it was scot-free because one of those brands was being sued for alarming levels of PFAs and forever chemicals and endocrine disrupting chemicals. So it's like, okay, we're going to take out the super, super toxic stuff and just leave the rest of the toxic stuff in there. And that was my first big blindside, I think, after the point of awakening, where I started to understand that our health, as precious as it is really not protected. Our babies aren't even protected. Not really. And then I started understanding more about drop shipping, and I know people who are drop shippers and who make products for the market, and some of them are conscious and some of them are not conscious, and some of them care about consumers and some of them don't. And then I started scaling that up in my mind. Like the people that I know, and even just tangentially know, they care about profit. That's actually what they care about. They care about squeezing out the competition. And they don't always care about protecting anybody, especially when they're so distant from the consumer. And when your eyes are open to this and you start researching it, and it's kind of hard, you have to really be diligent in your research. And thankfully, there's places like TikTok that can expose you to it. Like once you demonstrate interest in learning about it, and the algorithm will serve you things that you wouldn't have necessarily thought to look for. And what I have discovered in this past year is horrifying. It's actually horrifying. From the perfumes to the clothes, like our plastic clothes that are soaked in forever chemicals, to the hair products, to deodorant. And I mean, it's endless. It's like we are living in pollution, but it doesn't even stop there. Our food supply is completely, I don't even have the word for it. Okay, maybe not completely, but alarming. It's incredibly alarming. And for example, for my daughter's 1 year birthday, I went to the store and I bought this box cake, a brand that I used to love. I have moved away from processed food and packaged foods for some time now, but I thought this is going to be a great moment because I just thought there would be so much nostalgia there. And about the icing too. And I made the cake. And after the first piece, I felt horrible. I felt like there was something wrong. And my baby started acting really weird too, like all cracked out, like even like moving her jaw to the side. And it was weird. Like she started acting really bizarre, which I guess is normal for a lot of kids that eat a lot of packaged processed food. But literally, like I cook whole foods and now, I've loosened up a little bit. I eat crackers, but that's aside. That's it pretty much. I don't eat frozen food anymore. I don't eat bread that is lasts for more than a couple of days and isn't like freshly baked from a bakery. Like I've really changed everything in my whole diet. And so I ate this cake and I felt this sensation of fullness that felt really strange. And it felt like inflammation. Because when I eat now and I'm full, it feels comfortable and it feels natural and it doesn't feel sickening in any way. And even when I eat freshly prepared baked goods, except I can tell when there's cheap margarine in it or cheap oils. And I can only have it like in moderation because my body doesn't really like it. But the fact that I'm even in tune with that now is remarkable. And anyway, so this box cake, super laden with all sorts of chemicals. I didn't think that that was a big deal because it never used to be a big deal before my awakening journey. I would eat stuff like that all the time without a second thought. And what I didn't realize is that feeling of inflammation fullness was my normal then. And God rest my grandmother, she would make a Thanksgiving predominantly of box food and packaged food, except for like the potatoes and the turkey, of course. But that feeling was what I associated around the holidays. And you know how everybody says like people gain weight around the holidays, which is not natural to gain that much weight after eating just a couple of days, but it's inflammation weight. And I also live out of the United States and I have access to food that isn't adulterated. And so it has taken leaving for years, leaving the food supply and becoming reacquainted with it to realize the effect that it actually has. And other people have talked about that too, so I won't rehash that. But many of our diseases come from the very thing that's supposed to be healing us. And here is the maddening thing about this, tying it back to the beginning. We are driving cars effectively without any indicators that something is going wrong. And there are so many things going wrong. There are so many things. If you're educated, you know. If you don't know, I encourage you to do your research when it makes sense for you, but it's overwhelming. How is it that we could be driving these vehicles and not have a clear indication that our environment is poisoning us and being able to pinpoint it to what is poisoning us? Because this is what the capitalist system has designed. No accountability. Literally. And I love capitalism. I really do. I think it's a great system, but late stage capitalism is horrific. It's really horrific. And when conscious capitalism is done well, I am in favor of that. So I'm not trying to diss capitalism as an ideology at all, but the problems that we're facing, the mounting health concerns, how our bodies are decrepit and their natural healing abilities overrun, absolutely overrun by the chemicals that we're ingesting. So, just a personal example, I didn't know this. Skin tags, apparently, I cut myself one time and gave myself a skin tag. Thought that, like this is just normal. It's not a big deal, just a small little skin tag. Well, after I gave birth, I went a very long time without using certain products. And what I found is that the skin tags started disappearing. I couldn't believe it. They were literally disappearing. Or that one skin tag that I'm referencing was started to disappear and retract slowly. And I realized my body was healing itself. I thought that it was because of the hormones, and I thought that things were resetting in my body. What I didn't expect is that when I started using old products that I had used before, when the skin tag was growing, I didn't expect that that skin tag would come back so fast. Like it hadn't almost nearly disappeared entirely. And I did some research, and that product is also being sued for poisoning people through the skin. Like, WTF. And the crazy thing is, I saw a dermatologist about a different skin tag that they removed, and they said, well, it's going to grow back. Damn right, it's going to grow back, apparently, because of the products that we're apparently using. You see, the body in its natural state wants to heal itself and not to have abnormal growths. And what happens is when we overwhelm the body's capacity to clean things up, to remove things like skin tags that are not supposed to be there, what we find is that even our doctors are like, well, it's just going to grow back, as if it's our skin that's the problem, as if our skin is the thing that is not intelligent, not our companies that are putting these chemicals in our products and selling it to consumers with the marketing, hey, this is healthy, this is good for you. Joe Bob, thank you. You really care about me. You went so far as to make the label really pretty for me and attractive for me and for everybody else. And when we try to hold institutions accountable, I mean, it's crazy what happens. People lose their credibility. Like there was this advocate for healthy cereal to remove the food dyes in the United States because Kellogg's is apparently selling a ton of food dyes in their cereals. But in other countries, they're using natural fruit juice where these food dyes are banned because they've been shown, there's actual science, to have ill effects on children, especially on their behaviors and ADHD-like behaviors, as well as other neurocognitive effects. And so this advocate, activist woman, tried to bring about this change. And what ended up happening is that they protested at Kellogg's headquarters. And this woman made great progress, but her reputation was totally decimated in the social media arena. There were so many, quote, experts that were coming out and actually tearing her down, saying she's not credible. She doesn't have a background in the science. But guess what? I do. And I'm telling you that these food dyes are perfectly safe and they're perfectly normal. And, and there's no concern whatsoever. And then some independent journalist types, content creators, started doing some digging and found out that those, quote, experts were actually on the payroll of said big companies for propaganda support. And to me, it looked like also there were bots that were AI generated that were actually, in addition to real people, there were actual profiles and presence of AI, quote, expert bots. I don't have time to go into my intuition about why I believe this, but the bots and the botnets as propaganda machines are very well known if you're in the know. If you're not in the know, then it's an interesting find to find out that a lot of the comments that you see that are trying to sway your opinion are actually part of a bot farm. And there are experts that are bots as well, although I don't believe this is well known. Anyway, so there was this whole charge that was trying to destroy this woman, all to bring about healthy change. For who? Our children. Which brings me back to this point that if we are existing in these physical forms, why wouldn't we want diagnostics? And this is what I believe the benefit to transhumanism is, at least in my utopia. I don't know about this shit show here. I'm not saying you need to go out and do anything transhuman. I'm not saying that at all. But in this idea that I have, we need to use the data effectively. And if the data already exists, and I believe that it actually does, then we need to be able to employ it for things like public safety and health in an ethically oriented way. Because otherwise, we are walking chemical bombs. Our health it's unreal when you find out about all of the effects that are buried and hidden and people that are silenced. I mean, it's just crazy that even if we were to survive an apocalypse, and the jury's still out on that, although I have high hopes where I'm at least, and we're going to make it past that curve, and that there's not going to be one. I don't foresee one in my timeline. I could be wrong though. I am wrong sometimes. Even if we make it past that point, we're going to be like that friend of mine with his father passing, totally oblivious and unaware until we just go to sleep and not wake up.